one of the things that most, ops people struggle with is, to your point, the big vision to say, is this even a product? And, is this even a service? Is this something that we can make money doing? And it's fantastic when I can go to my operations people and go, hey, check this out. This is the new baby and it's making money, right? Now go make it better. And they're like, okay, I can do that. I can do that.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
100%, man. Hey, I'm Armando Leduc, producer, film actor, and owner of Leduc Entertainment. I have chosen a life off the beaten path and wanted to find others that are doing the same. Spaghetti on the Wall is a show based on all of the years that I've thrown spaghetti on the wall and nurtured what stuck. We will share fun stories, ideas, tips, tricks, and more. Welcome to Spaghetti on the Wall. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on when you are consuming this podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, back with another Spaghetti on the Wall with Don Monistere. What's up, dude?
Man, staying busy. How about yourself?
Oh, dude. Busy's good, man. Busy's good.
Yeah.
You know, they say there's a recession going on. Do you believe it?
I'm sure there are certain industries that are struggling in certain areas, but technology, anything IT related doesn't seem to get that break. I will say that we've been fortunate in that, we don't get the super, super highs whenever the economy is just killing it, but we also don't get the super, super lows. I think we have become a necessity. And you know what? I don't mind that. That's not too bad.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. So tell me how you got involved in IT. So you got General Informatics. Number one, General Informatics, IT company, Baton Rouge, but they don't just exist in Baton Rouge. They're all over the South, right?
Yes, we are. So we have 11 locations throughout the Southeast. I actually came on board about 3 years ago, and we had 3 locations at the time. So we've been expanding pretty aggressively through organic growth as well as through acquisition. And so really excited about what we're doing here at GI. It's been a wild ride, but as you can imagine, anybody in the tech space, with what's going on with AI and security and all of these things that we get hit with every single day, it's never a dull moment. So I chose an industry on accident, and turns out it was exactly the kind of thing that I enjoy and that I love because I get to do something different every day.
How did it happen? By accident?
So I was finishing up my undergrad degree at Southeastern Louisiana University. Shout out to the Lions, and I had a buddy of mine who had opened up a systems integration company. He had a small retail shop, and he was doing some networking back in the day. Now, keep in mind, this is 1990, so it's not like like it is today, right?
Sure.
And so I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur, and I knew that at some point I was going to have to figure out something about this new thing called a personal computer because I knew I couldn't afford a mainframe. So I said, you know what? I'm going to go find out a little bit about PCs and what all the hype is about. And man, I got there and I found out that I just had a knack for it. My background was management. I had a management degree. I was really focused on, what it takes to run an organization, but I didn't really think that I would enjoy technology. Now, I was like every other, high school kid growing up. I like to tinker with my radio in my car and all that stuff. But man, when I got to my first day on the job, I started looking inside the machines. And back then we were building clone PCs, right? And so I started looking into the inner workings of the system, and it just made sense to me. And so within 2 days, I was building systems,
Mm-hmm.
which if you've ever done that, it's not super hard. But I recognized that I kind of got into this industry when it was still DOS. It was still, Microsoft Windows had just come out with 1.0. It was horrible. And and so I really got in on the ground floor, and I just loved it. I loved what I was doing. And very quickly I had taken over. I'd say after about 6 months of working here in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, I moved to Jackson, Mississippi, and we started running a team out there. And after 3 years of doing this right out of college, I decided, hey, I know everything I need to know. I'm going to go start my own company. And so I moved to Birmingham, Alabama, got married, and opened my own systems integration company at the same time. I mean, what
Mm,
could go wrong, right? So,
lots.
yes. And despite, you know, really probably starting that company way too soon, I grew that over 15 years. We were a typical value added reseller back in the day. And what that basically means is we represented various manufacturers like Dell and EMC and Cisco. And we did everything that we could to add value from a professional services perspective. And then in 2004, really the consumption behavior of our consumers really started to change. And what they were saying was, hey, I want our goals to be aligned. It seems like whenever I have a really bad day, you have a really good day. How can we align that? So I pay one price for services that you provide me, and it can be a little bit more predictive. And that's what kind of started this whole process of managed services where we pay by the user or the consumer pays by the user. And man, it was a very big difference. It was a big change for our organization. But as soon as we started doing that and doing that well, we began to get a lot of attention from private equity. And
Mm,
so in 2008, after 15 years of growing my company and really, really sewing into what made us special, I sold my company to a small private equity company out of Boston, and they merged me with a much larger company called TechLinks. And I was on the leadership team and ran their sales department, ran what we were doing from a commercial sales perspective. And after about 6 years, I actually we had sold the company to another private equity organization, and the new CEO came in and said, "Hey, man, you're the only guy I got that has sales background, knows operations. Your formal training is all in operations." During that time, I'd gotten my master's degree, and so he's like, "Hey, how about you move into more of the ops side of the business?" And probably the best compliment I ever got was one day he walked in my office and he's like, "Hey man, you've outsold our ability to deliver, so can you go fix that?" So I
wow.
eventually became the chief operations officer for that organization. Uh, a year and a half later, became the president, and we sold that company in 2018. And not soon after that, a private equity company out of Dallas called me, Rosewood Private Investments, and said, "Hey, we're thinking about acquiring General Informatics, and we keep looking for the right CEO, and your name keeps coming to the top." I'm like, "Dude, you got to change your search algorithm. Something's not right there." But nonetheless, they got me to come out back to Baton Rouge, and I thought, wow, I've been in Birmingham for 27 years, and I get to maybe hopefully finish out my career back home here in Baton Rouge. And the cool thing about this whole experience is, my mother still lives in Hammond, Louisiana. So man, every Sunday that I can, I get to go eat spaghetti and meatballs
That's awesome, man.
every Sunday. So
Very, very cool. What's the secret to such explosive growth, man?
man, I've always said that, when you've got the right financial partner, there's a lot of things that you can do, but you got to be really, really mindful of, where you place your investments, right? We have a very specific organic strategy and how we grow into new territories, as well as a very specific acquisition strategy. And I'll start with the acquisition strategy. We're not just looking for folks that, want to sell, right? We obviously have certain financial criteria that we have to meet. But more importantly, I want to find those businesses that have an opportunity to grow organically, but they just don't have the investment to do it. So what that does is give us kind of a 1-2 punch. So for instance, if we acquire a business in Texas, let's say, I want to see what their plans are to expand past their market that they're in at that moment. And if those plans really can be, you know, kind of push forward with injection of capital, that is ripe for, what we do when we engage with private equity. And man, I've been private equity owned since '08, so I've been, very familiar with that approach and how that works and what they're looking for. So it's all about building that growth engine that can supply private equity what they're looking for. The other piece of this is organic growth. Like, how do you build a sales engine that truly can generate organic growth, because you can't just acquire yourself to growth. You have to show at some point that you have the ability to run the organization and grow the organization without doing acquisition. And that has everything to do with your overall, marketing automation, which is really the tip of the spear. And then how does that marketing automation create lead generation so that your sales team can come in and take those leads and bring them to close. So it's about having a very specific process. With my background being in operations, we don't just focus on operational processes and procedures, but we do the same in marketing and in sales as well. So it's all about having a process and working that process and tweaking that process. I always say if you have a plan, you can tweak your plan. If you don't have a plan, you can't tweak. So it's all about having that plan and that process so that you are moving your company towards growth.
Talk to me about your KPIs and how that was established and how you guys kind of put all of those things in place and, holding people accountable. Are you familiar with EOS?
Yes, very familiar with EOS. In fact, I would argue that I was one of the first to really jump on the EOS bandwagon back in 2008-ish when Gino Wickman first came out with his book. And it really, at the time, I was actually studying management frameworks, and it's really how I ended up publishing my books, was kind of some motivation from Gino. I was looking at what he was doing. I studied the Baldrige system. I studied a number of different frameworks, the ITIL framework, and what I found was, hey man, there's something to be said about what we do specifically in technology and how we go about, executing our day-to-day business. And I kind of took what Gino was talking about, what I read in Baldrige, what I was studying in ITIL, and came up with this framework that was very specific for IT. And so that's what I started to implement when I was at TechLinks, and we continued to grow the organization and scale the organization, which is a lot different than growing, right? Scale is a little bit different in that you're growing the revenue while the pace of the cost is not growing nearly as fast. And so what I started to recognize was, hey, we're kind of onto something. And someone approached me and said, hey, can you write all this down, and you ought to publish a book because this is really effective. And I recognized at the time, look, I didn't want to just write something about, corporate success or even success as an executive. I wanted to put people in a really good position to be successful so that they could execute at a level that's much higher than just the average person. So I started my enhanced series of books, and it wasn't called that at the time, but it just so happened as I was going through this process of helping one of my executives learn the process, he says, man, it's like I'm on steroids. And I was like, enhanced performance. And so instead of performance enhancing something, we said, hey, it's the enhanced performance of life, enhanced performance of executive, in my latest book that came out this past November, enhanced corporate performance. So um, all three of those books talk about how do you put yourself in the best position to be successful? How do you execute at a super high level? And how do you do that consistently? And to your point about the question on KPIs, it you've got to measure it. You've got to find out what are those leading indicators that happen in your organization, that happen in your job role, and for that matter, what happens in your life that tells you you're moving in the right direction. And man, I track it every single day. There are some really specific things that I look at. One of them is how am I doing as a husband? How am I doing as a boss? How am I doing as a friend? All of those things tie in, and it helps us get to that place that we want to be. Which, most people, when I was doing research for my book, I asked the question, "What is it that you're trying to accomplish?" And I asked 100 executives, and the lion's share of the executives say, "I just want to leave a legacy." Well, that's a pretty big ask. That's not I just want to have a job, or I want to be a little bit successful. I mean, I want to be remembered after I'm long gone, and it's really difficult to do that. And I created something called a legacy impression. And a legacy impression is when you've done something, you've sewn into someone, you've coached someone, you've helped someone, and it's done such a good job for them in their life that they provided you with information back saying, hey, this one thing that you did for me changed my world. And when I get those things, when that happens in my life, man, I write it down. I make sure if they've sent me an email or sent me a photo or whatever, I save that and I put it in my what I call my win box. Because brother, there's plenty of days that I've been kicked in the teeth. And every once in a while I go back to that win box and go, all right, I'm doing something right because I'm influencing. I'm taking the opportunity to sow into people and put them in a really good position to be successful. So, man, that's if we're not measuring what we're doing, if we're not tracking the things that are super important to our life and to our business, then it's really hard to know whether or not you're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, man, good point. I'm reading a book right now. It's called 10X is Better Than 2X. Are you familiar?
Yes, yeah, I am. I
Woo.
haven't read it. I read the original 10X book
Oh, by Grant Cardone?
by Grant
Yeah,
Cardone.
it's a completely different book.
Is it really?
Completely different.
Man, I'm gonna put it on my list.
Oh, dude, it has changed the molecules of my brain.
Wow.
Yeah, there's very another book that did that for me was called Switch. That was another
Yes.
really good book. But this one was just like, okay, it's just they wrote a book called The Gap and the Gain, and it was good that you mentioned that, like, you wrote down this like win box, right? Because a lot of people they're measuring themselves to an ideal that they're never going to reach, right?
Right.
And when they start to get sort of all of these wins, they forget about it and they become more and more depressed because they're always focused on the ideal and never on the gains of what got them there to begin with. Right. So I love that you write that stuff down in a win box. I'm gonna start writing that stuff down too. But yeah, like it really is fascinating when you're scaling a company, the things that you have to ignore, right?
Yes.
And delegate out. Because you can't work on, because you can't, not everything is important, right? And the delineation, I don't know if that's the word, but figuring out what's important and what's not, right? And having that discernment to make sure that you are working on the rocks, right? For your company and making sure that is what we're working on a quarterly basis to make sure that at the end of the year, we're somewhere, right?
Yeah. You hit on something, and it's almost as if you were in my executive meeting this morning. One of the hardest things for me is really, I place a super high value in execution. I don't like it when I see CEOs who all they do is plan and strategy and la la la. And it's like, hey man, somebody's got to go sell something, right? Let's go do something, right? And so, but I probably lean too far into the execution. And so my team holds me accountable. They're like, that's not something the CEO needs to be working on. You should have said no to that. And there are times where I'm like, all right, well, I'm in. So if y'all can handle it, y'all do it. But they're like, no, finish, because you're the only one qualified to do it. But the answer should have been no. And so I get those guys to hold me accountable to that, because I can get out of hand with that. And you're right. There are certain things that you just have to say no to. And one of the things that I tell our team all the time is, I want you to be passionate, but I don't want you to be overly emotional. Like, be passionate about what you do. Make sure that we're out there grinding and doing the right things and making sure that we're not just talking to people about numbers. We're not just talking to people about KPIs. We're talking to them about their family. We're talking to them about, hey, how is this influencing and impacting your life? But we can't get overly emotional about that, right?
Yeah.
Be passionate for people, be passionate for what we do for our customers. But man, if you react emotionally, a lot of times you forget the logic and you can overreact, or for that matter, underreact to a situation that really needs a little bit more attention.
Yeah. There's a good book. It's called The 6 Types of Working Genius. Have you read it?
No, I have not. Man, you're giving me great.
You know, I wish I could take credit for all of these books, but I got a financial advisor and, you know, my mentor who's always like, read this book, now read this book, now read this.
Right.
But the 6 Steps of Working Genius really changed my relationship with my employees, but it also changed my relationship with my wife.
Yes.
Because in the book, there's the acronyms called WIDGET, right? Wonder, invention, discernment, galvanizing, enablement, and tenacity. And each,
I love that.
oh, dude, all of the, so everybody has 2 of these strengths and 2 of the weaknesses, right?
Yes.
And so if you can find in the organization who's good at these different things, then you're going to, you know, it's like a rocket, right? So wonder is like all of the people that are wonder, you know, love questions. And then inventors are the idea guys. 30 ideas an hour, right?
Yeah.
Discernment are the people that are good at discerning whether or not an idea is good. And I have, that is not my quality, right? But my wife, my project manager, and COO, all high on discernment. And I always thought that they were just shitting on my parade. I'm like, why are you guys crapping on my ideas, right?
Why are y'all Dr. No?
Yeah, but they're like, but what they were doing was they were like, Armando, you didn't really think about this. You didn't think about this, this. And I'm like, oh, yeah. So now I'm going through an impact filter, which I learned from that book, Who Not How, in terms of like an idea. And I'm like, all right, is this idea just an idea? Is this an idea that I can like marry with another idea? Or is this just a distraction? You know? Yeah. And so now I'm like, you know, and then galvanizing is people that are good at rallying the troops, motivating. Enablement are your people that are like support staff, don't need the spotlight. And then tenacity are the people that love to carry it over, which I think you probably have a lot of tenacity.
Yeah.
I don't. So I could come up with an idea. And I had the epiphany the other day because I was talking to another visionary type. And I was like, do you have the idea where you like, in your brain, you see an idea and you've lived it. Like you can see it all the way to completion. Right? So for you, you've already lived it and you don't necessarily need to see it finished because in your brain, you've already seen it. Right? But it drives other people crazy, especially, you know, if you're running that CEO, you know, and they're like, no. This needs to be done. We are going to finish this. And I'm like, hallelujah. You know, that's been the thing.
It's so funny because you reminded me of in my TechLinks days, I had a gentleman who was over marketing and he was a fantastic visionary. He was one of the top guys in the MSP space, in the technology space, just from a standpoint of productization and making sure that the messaging was really clean and crisp. And he would literally stand up on a stage. I'd sit in the audience and he'd say something and he goes, "Hey, is any of that true?" I'm like, yeah. Let me change just 1 or 2 words. But yeah, that's a remarkably good way to position that. And he used to tell, you know, whenever he would do presentations or whenever we'd go do consulting, he's like, look, I come up with these ideas and then Don tells me whether or not we can go execute them. Because at the time I was a chief operations officer. And so I was very much that guy that said, all right, that's a bridge too far. We can't do that. But if we tweak this a little bit, we can deliver it that way. And so I had to shift, you know, when I became the president and then started moving more into, you know, the more, you know, the CEO role or the president role, I had to shift my thinking of I can't be worried about the execution side as much and let those guys and gals who are responsible for the execution go handle that. And so what I've found that I typically will do is I'll build something in a very entrepreneurial way because that's kind of what I love to do. And I'll get all the processes working and then like I hand it to somebody and go, okay, go make that better.
Hallelujah.
And they do, right? I mean, if you hand them something, one of the things that most, you know, ops people struggle with is, to your point, the big vision to say, is this even a product? And, you know, is this even a service? Is this something that we can make money doing? And it's fantastic when I can go to my operations people and go, hey, check this out. This is the new baby and it's making money, right? Now go make it better. And they're like, okay, I can do that.
Yeah.
Very cool.
100%, man. So switching gears a little bit, because I know you guys do MSP. I'm sure you guys are obviously handling like hospitals and big,
Yes.
attorneys and things like that. What about the guys that are like, small business owners that are also at risk? How are you, are they even on your radar,
Yeah.
or you guys are just kind of dealing with
No.
big fish?
Great question. So I would say 70% of our business is going to be 100 users and below. So I deal with folks like that all day, every day. And sadly for them, they have the same needs as, the, you know, 500 bed hospital, right? And they've got to figure out, okay, how can I do that in a budget that I can afford? And man, I tell folks, because I one of those departments or divisions that I created was our security division, and I I say all the time, I could spend every dollar you have in IT on security alone and still not promise you that you're safe. I mean, it's a misnomer. Anybody that
Oof.
says that is going to lie to you about other things too. So, move on. When they say you're 100% safe, there's just no way, because the fact that humans interact with the devices that we support is part of the issue, right? And there's a lot of room for error if we're not doing everything we need to do from an education perspective. My job is to drastically reduce the propensity of that ever happening, right? And then the second phase, which nobody likes to think about, is okay, let's go build the plan of what that day, what day two, or what hour two, or minute two looks like when we realize we've been breached. Nobody likes to have that conversation because they can say, well, you're supposed to keep me from being breached. Yes, but we need to be prepared. And so, what does that look like? And so, to answer your question, man, we are constantly working with that small business owner who is just trying to find out, hey, how can I exist, put myself in the best position to be successful, and reduce my risk as much as possible? Because it truly is a kind of a risk tolerance conversation. I can you tell me what you're willing to tolerate, and then we can build the budget around that, because we have base levels of security, we have really advanced levels of security, and for each industry it's a little different, right? If you're somebody who is, providing support for the DoD, that's a very different conversation than if you work at, Jimmy's Jiffy Lube, right? But it's still important. You
Sure.
still, Jimmy's Jiffy Lube always tells me, hey man, like, why does anybody care about my data? And I'm like, they don't. They know you do. So if they can have access to it and they can control it and they can encrypt it so that you can't use it, you'll pay for that. And
Mm.
trust me, there are businesses that people wake up in the morning, pick up their briefcase, and go off to the business that is 100% illegal, but that's what they do day in and day out, and it's like a regular job for them. And so our job is to make sure that they're not getting to any of our customers. And man, it's a daily grind. It is a daily grind for our security side. But we do everything we can to wrap process and procedure around the distribution and the delivery of IT services, because the more effective and efficient that is, the lower the cost is. And that's something that I think we've done a really good job of, because yes, we do have a number of hospitals and banks, and they have to adhere to a lot more governance than a smaller business. But man, the goal is the same. The goal is to give me access to my data, whenever I need it, make sure that the data has integrity, and make sure it's safe, and and it's the same goal for everybody.
How do you convince somebody, especially business owners? I feel like business owners are very they're high on the risk taking, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So businesses do what? Three things. They make you money, save you money, or mitigate risk, right?
Right.
So you guys are mitigating risk,
Yes.
right? How are you, what's that sales conversation like when you're like, listen, man,
Yeah.
I know you're safe. I know you've been safe, or you think you're safe, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
we're in this la la land of thinking that, we're not going to get it, right? But
Yeah. Yeah.
then you get it, and then you're sort of screwed. So how does that sales conversation happen where it doesn't feel so, I guess, heavy-handed?
Yeah, no, it's a fair question, and look, sometimes for their own good, you've got to be a little bit more passive about what's really the case, right? I mean, you know, I don't appreciate the fear mongering that goes on in our industry because it makes our jobs even harder. It's like, every time you turn around, somebody's saying, you know, it's going to cost you $8 million if you ever got breached, and like, it's not going to cost me $8 million because my company's not worth $8 million. So, like that that never resonates
Mm,
with end users. And to your point, entrepreneurs are inherent risk takers. They like to take risk. Heck, it gets them kind of juiced up, right? And so the conversation is more about risk tolerance, risk management, and making sure that they understand that whether you believe you're doing it actively or not, you're managing your risk every day. You're trying to decide, hey, should I do this level of advertising with this amount of money to beat my competitor so that I don't risk losing market share, right? So you're talking about risk every day. When we talk about IT risk, I can honestly say, look, it's really not a question of if, it's a question of when, and it may be very innocuous when it happens, but what the case, how bad that is really dependent upon the person that takes over your data and what they want in return. And you know, don't get me wrong, the bigger targets are the ones that get the really heavy hitter type approaches from cyber attacks. But at the end of the day, this game for them is volume. It's how many people can I get, you know, 15 grand from or 20 grand from? Because if I get one company that'll pay me $10,000 to get their data back, then I've had a good day. And
right.
like those guys are measuring KPIs too, right? Sadly.
Yeah, yeah,
um,
yeah.
so a lot of times we have the opportunity to tell stories that are true. And man, when I love it when a business owner gets a breach, goes through that process with me, and says, "Hey, man, I give you permission to tell everybody because I don't want this to ever happen to anyone else." And that's a good approach these days because 5 years ago you got breached, nobody told anybody anything, right? It was like, don't say that. We don't want people to think that we are not being prudent in how we protect our data. At least today, because we know it's a lot more prevalent than what we thought it was 5 years ago. It was just as prevalent back then, just people didn't talk about it, right?
Right.
um, but yeah, it's a difficult conversation, especially for that entrepreneur who is used to taking risks, and he's like, look, I can't spend that amount of money because I don't think that's ever going to happen. Like, okay, let's walk through that, and then if you still feel that way, then we'll go with the base level of security, and we'll all hope for the best. Just recognize when we see traffic on your network, or we see, attempts to try to get into your firewall, we're going to let you know that. And we're not just telling you that because we want to sell you something. We're telling you that because you need to be informed so that you can make good decisions in the future.
Mm, I love that. Dude, it's such a. I was at an MSP conference at Kaseya in Vegas couple years
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah.
Your industry is just is blowing up, man.
Yes.
Like
It
people,
is.
people out there, if they're thinking about what, what they should be getting into,
Yeah.
this IT. I mean, there's,
Well, and it's funny, man. Like if you start looking at what the hot buttons are these days, like data analytics, and I say a lot. We've got a ton of information, but we don't have a whole heck of a lot of actionable knowledge. So how do we make actionable knowledge in our company so that we can go execute better? And man, our data analytics business is exploding. We're seeing more and more people with these massive data sets going, hey, we have all this data, but we don't really know. We'd like to do some, you know, everybody keeps talking about artificial intelligence. I'm like, man, most people aren't even doing trend analysis, right? I mean, most people aren't looking at their data to see, what products and services they're selling and when.
wait.
And
So you guys do that?
oh yeah, Oh, heck yeah.
So you guys work with like, sales analytics, that the whole nine, like, and just feeding, I guess, a machine, and then at the end of the month getting reports back.
So we do it in very specific industries. One of the ones that we do it the most in is actually the maritime industry.
Mm.
And you would be shocked at how much data um, is collected and how much money can be saved, from goods and services coming off ships into ports and then getting to the consumer, right? Like all of those steps in that process, there's there's so much data that goes into that, and we're able to extract that information and provide that information back to them where they really can see value in having that data extracted. But we're finding it in many different industries where people are saying, hey, I just need some help taking, our current processes and procedures and and using our normal KPIs and building some sort of trend analysis that will tell me. So like, what Power BI allows you to do, like the Microsoft suite has really helped facilitate this because a lot of that data is sitting in, in an SQL server or in in a database of some sort that Microsoft has. And that whole process of grabbing that data and extrapolating true actionable knowledge is pretty effective, and it's really kind of cool to watch whenever you provide a report and man, the eyes light up and they're like, man, this, how cool this is, how this is going to make us better decision makers. That's fun. That is a whole lot of fun.
Look, I just started actually hiring a MSP COO, like fractional COO person, that like strictly deals with MSPs, but can do other businesses. And I'm like, come on,
Yeah.
I need this. I need this data. I need this data analyzed. I really want, because you're right. If if you have the information, you can make better decisions. If you don't even know what you don't know, you're sitting there and you're going, all right, is this being effective? Is it not being effective? How effective is it? Is this a waste of time? That's the biggest thing too. I think a lot of people waste time, trying to see if something works. And let me ask you that. At what point do you bail on an idea?
Man,
right?
such a good question. And part of our framework and how we run the business is, we have a very specific set of criteria that we have to meet for the year. And we use a calendar year. We have 3 very specific initiatives for the year, and we build KPIs around that initiative. And we agree, hey, when we review our KPIs, if we see a number that we don't like, we have to make one of 3 decisions. We do nothing because the current plan hasn't had enough time to work. We tweak something because it needs to be tweaked because what we're seeing from a trend perspective is not giving us what we think, or we completely change it. So, but we're not going to do nothing. We're going to actively decide, no, today's not the day to change it. And so as a CEO, and for that matter, our COO and my CRO, you start listening for, hey guys, that's the 3rd time I've heard we're not going to change anything. Tell me if the trend is showing something that's the antithesis of that decision, tell me what you're seeing that makes you believe we're doing the right thing. And so you kind of change the conversation a little bit. And look, you may decide, okay, we'll keep this path for another month. But again, if you're not tracking that, if you didn't have the plan to begin with, you're just kind of, hope is the strategy, right? And so we don't run the business that way, and we make sure that when we make decisions, we're being very, very deliberate and very disciplined. Because if you're both, and you have the discipline to track all of that information, you have the discipline to execute at that level, then business becomes a lot less magical, right? And dare I say, I don't know, I guess the word would be um, like elusive, and it's much easier to find the answers to the questions that you're asking every day. So, you got to build a plan, And look, that's one of the things that I love doing as an entrepreneur is helping organizations build a plan. And one of our services that we provide here is our virtual CIO and virtual CISO services. And one of my favorite things that I love to do, and this is one of those things that I have to say no to every once in a while, is a virtual CIO engagement where they contract with us for a year or 2 years to build the plan and help them track those things that are important to their organization. And how do they build a risk management program? And how do they address these issues both from a technology perspective, but also from an operational perspective? And back in the day, the key word was DevOps. Everybody said, "Oh, you got to have DevOps. You got to have Dev," and it's true. You like having, you know, what I call enterprise architecture, an architecture of how to run your enterprise, and that's everything from human resources to technical tool sets to application programs, and then to process and procedure, and making sure all of that is interwoven and super tight. Those are the companies that have hyperscale. And look, it's funny. As I was studying all this in my 30s, which is further back there than I was
last year, bro.
Yeah, I wish. I wish. I was thinking to myself, wow, man, this whole management framework thing can really create some scale. And I didn't recognize that I was doing something that private equity was salivating over. And so it was not an accident that I started listening to what they were saying and hearing how they wanted to scale. And I'm like, yeah, I can do that. I can show you how we do that. And so, I became somewhat of a target, for private equity, because they're like, hey, this guy, not only does he know how to do it, he wrote a book about it, right? Like we've got, if you want to know the corporation what to do, there it is, enhanced corporate performance. And that's how do you take your executives and get them executing at a super high level?
Yeah.
And then putting them all in that one framework and just let them go.
That's
fun.
Read it, man. 10x is better than 2x. You're doing it. That's it. That's it.
I'm gonna read it.
That's exactly what you're doing, because you're filtering everything that you're doing to the 10x model, right? And then everything that's 2x, you ignore. Everything else is 10x, right? If this is your strength, this is what you love, then keep doing that. Dude, I could talk to you all day, man. Your wealth of knowledge. But
thank you.
Tell them where they can find you.
Yeah, so a couple of places. Our website, geninf.com. You can get us there. You can email me directly at donm@geninf.com. You can call us locally here in Baton Rouge, 225-767-7670. And man, look, I get email all day, every day, and I answer every one of them. Because it's important for me to get really close to the field, what my customers are looking for, what my prospects are looking for, because we can't make good decisions if I don't know what you value, right, as my consumer. And so we're always looking for ways to communicate.
I love it, man. Y'all, if you guys need IT services, can't recommend General Informatics high enough. You guys are the real deal. And you guys know Connor, had him on the show earlier. So y'all check them out and hit them up, because they got some stuff going on, and we can get your book on Amazon, I'm sure.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. If you just go and you can search either the enhanced series or just search my name, Don Monistere, it'll go right to it.
Fantastic, man. Well, I appreciate you being on the show.
All right, man. Thank you. I appreciate you so much.
Yeah, man. And that was Spaghetti on the Wall, ladies and gentlemen, brought to you by Leduc Entertainment. For all of your digital marketing needs, social media, podcasting, we got you. And you can watch Spaghetti on the Wall anywhere, guys. Google it. Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube. We're all over the place. And we'll see y'all next week.